The previous basket is under review.
Hello, one and all. Welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast presented by Homefield, the world's finest purveyor of quality collegiate attire, and also presented by the Basket Under Review website, which is already, if I may say so, the best and most in-depth source for college hoops analysis on the planet. I'm your host, Eamonn Brennan. I write a college hoops newsletter called Buzzer at eamonnbrennan.com. I'll also be chipping in on the site this coming season. Yeah, that's me. Hello, folks. It's the third ever edition of the show. And we've got what I will call a very special guest today, a college basketball podcasting legend in his own right, the host of the Ringer's One Shining Pod, Tate Frazier. Tate, what's good, man?
Oh, great to hear your voice. Great to talk to you about college basketball. You and I are both on a mission, and I think everybody that's supporting you guys is on that main mission of making college basketball matter 12 months out of the year. You know what I mean? They try to tell us it only matters in 1 month in March, but again, we are fighting the good fight, and happy to pull my sword out and fight with you guys, and happy to be here to talk about all the many things that are happening in the offseason.
For sure, yeah. It's been a minute since we potted, but for those who don't know, I've been going on your show pretty regularly for the last couple seasons here, and it's been a blast. And Tate's been kind enough to do a bit of a role reversal today. Usually he's hosting and I'm guesting.
I love it. I'm having a great time over here.
Tate didn't have to prepare a rundown today. He could just show up and chill. But yeah, I think we're pretty much just going to do what we usually do, which is, talk ball at some length and hopefully in great detail. And just at the top of the show for folks, we're going to talk about the draft, I think. I haven't had a chance to talk really to anybody with the draft. I know you spent some time on the various Ringer family of podcasts, popping in and giving folks some college-eyed views on guys going to the NBA when the NBA guys are like, wait, who's Derek Queen? What's his deal? And you've got the full rundown, which I particularly enjoy. And guys were interested to see transition to the pros, and we'll talk a little bit revenue sharing and the recent sort of panicked freak out from coaches about how the new system is going to work, and do some storylines and so forth. But first, just off the top here, I like I said, we haven't talked in a while. What's been animating you this offseason? Let's do a little check-in. What have you been thinking about? What's been sort of popping for you for college hoops in the dead of the offseason?
Yeah, I think the one word for me after dealing with, we got the AAU window happening, we got Summer League happening. Agents run everything, and I think I realized this when I went to the McDonald's All-American game. I was working that event, got to go to the practice. There's all the NBA execs, all the agents, and you say to yourself, why are these high school kids around all of these people already? Because they're already in the system. We know that. It kind of starts at 15, but it used to be the AAU of it all, right? They would have a hand in this, but I feel like Omar Cooper, who became a story and a star of the draft in his own right, obviously managing Ace Bailey and that whole drama that played out, but that was a throwback AAU guy, you know what I mean? But now they're agents. Agents run everything. They run our sport. They run high school. They run AAU. They run NBA. So my big thought process just about where we are is just shout out to the agents. They're running the game right now.
Yeah, we'll get to this in the revenue sharing thing, but Matt Norlander had a piece, I think it was last week, talking about coaches sort of panicking, freaking out about what the new system is going to look like, as I mentioned at the top. And one of the people he talked to was an agent who's been, sort of in coaches' ears being like, guys, if the rules, if they screw up these rules, just ignore them. And you're like, this guy's just an agent. Like, why is he,
Right.
But they do wield that sort of power. Yeah, the Omar Cooper thing was, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I have not mentioned it on this podcast or really at all. But the classic riding around, taking a video of yourself trying to look like hard in your car.
It was great.
While you're managing the career of a potential future NBA All-Star. That is a 2007 level of.
It felt very like Birdman aesthetic, you know what I mean?
Yes,
like early big timers days, like, you know what I mean? That was sort of the vibe he was going for. I really wanted him when they went to Utah and they got off the plane and he was on the plane with Ace. I thought he should have done another video, like walking down the ramp with the 100%. Same energy. That would have been nice.
Who's the ball kid? Is it LiAngelo who made that rap song that sounded like people talking like it's like 2007 Madden music or whatever, like that? He should have had that in the background.
I might swear I've been that corner. Whoa. That's what he said.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Great song, honestly. Kind of a good song. Low key, not a bad song.
Tickles our millennial heart. You know what I mean? That's how it goes.
100%. Okay, so you mentioned Ace Bailey. He is on my list of in my notes here of guys that I wanted to talk about transitioning to the pros. Probably the biggest drama of the NBA draft and a guy coming from college. And I think the drama kind of overshadowed his game a little bit because it gave people, understandably, when you're an NBA franchise, you're NBA media or an NBA fan, and you're like, okay, we're picking in the what is it? What did he go 5? We're picking in the top 5. We've got a chance to potentially land a franchise player here, and there's rumblings maybe he doesn't want to go there. And you see his agent is doing the '07 AAU self-posting videos thing, like Stephon Marbury style. And I would encourage people who only followed Ace Bailey through the draft and maybe a little bit of summer league to go back and watch him play at Rutgers, because
Agree.
you can see everything as his NBA future. You know, I mean, extremely high ceiling guy. So let's start with him. He's not a particularly like deep cut guy, but since we're on the topic of Bailey, what was your kind of take on all of that stuff as a primarily a college fan whose experience with Ace Bailey was just watching him play a bunch of basketball and not kind of the ephemeral stuff that surrounded him?
Well, I said this to Zach Lowe when he asked me about Ace Bailey. My favorite thing about Ace was that he had his best games on the road. That Indiana game is really the game that I go back to, where he just kind of put on a shot-making masterclass, and that is the best version. That is the Ace Bailey that you buy into, that you believe in, and that's the version that we kind of saw, I feel like, more of, you know, as college basketball fans. Like, we saw Ace have these incredible performances, Dylan with the injuries and kind of was in and out, but I think the real story was how going back to the agents to give some credit here, the way that Dylan handled his process and kind of what went wrong at Rutgers was very professionally done. And it just felt like, okay, it's not his fault. And then it felt like the blame, because there was no actual apparatus to defend Ace Bailey. Like, it's sort of the cloud was like, is he the problem? He takes some bad shots. You know what I mean? Does he have an idea of what a good shot is? And then all of a sudden, like, he acts really young. And you and I know, watching how Ace behaves, I mean, he definitely is a young kid and behaves like an AAU young kid would. And guess what? He is really young. So it makes sense. So a lot of the stuff I felt like got almost blown out of proportion because there was no professional apparatus around him to save him from kind of those stories leaking around. And again, if you watch Rutgers, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper were not the problem. It was kind of, you know, obviously the rest of the roster.
I mean, I was going to say, like, the answer is very simple to NBA GMs. It's like, hey, man, I was playing with a bunch of bums. Like,
right.
It was me and Ace and a bunch of guys who shouldn't have been in the Big Ten because...
And somehow Ace became like the fall
Pikel
guy.
maxed his NIL budget on two of us. Like,
right. Yeah, we were a top-heavy roster. Everybody kind of knows it. And, you know, as far as the concerns, I think because they had, you know, Isaac Okoro has Omar as his agent, I believe, as well as, you know, and Sharif, his son. So I think it was more of like the bad word of mouth about the representation, then leaked into the game. And then sort of the worst parts of Ace's game got highlighted. And, you know, that's unfortunate because, again, the highlights and the best version of Ace is very enticing. And like you said, if you're Utah, you might have got a franchise guy at number 5.
Yeah. Which brings me to my next guy, who I'm really annoyed about this, honestly. And I wrote about it at the time, but thinking about it again now, Con Knuppel is, to me, 10 years ago, would have been maybe a 2, maybe a 3-year player in college. NBA scouts would have been kind of put off by the lack of athleticism, not really sure what position he is. Where do we play him? Is he a guard or a wing or kind of a 4? What do we do with him? And the NBA is just so smart now and so flexible and tactically astute, I feel like, that he's the number 3 pick because he's just an awesome player. And he's the kind of guy that 10 years ago, I feel like college fans would have been screaming from the rooftops like, hey, this guy's really good. Someone should draft him. And he'd go late in the first round or early in the second round. And you'd get to have like a Draymond Green experience where you're like, hey, man, I covered this guy for 4 years in college. His mentality is insane. He's going to figure it out one way or the other in the NBA. But of course, now it's like this guy goes number 3 overall. He's the Summer League MVP. There's a much smaller wiggle room and margin for us to feel like haughty about players now. And maybe there'll be some guys in the second round that we can get to that will fit that bill. The second round's a little watered down these days, but the Con Knupples of the world are just like, you can't hide them anymore. He didn't go play at Virginia for 2 or 3 years, and then you're like, I think you might want to draft this guy. This Malcolm Brogdon guy is actually really good. Like, he could be a really good pro, and he's a top 3 pick.
That's exactly who I was about to say, Brogdon. That's a great call. I feel like that is sort of who Knippel is, and the fact that he is so smart, and the fact that I think the ACC tournament to me was the big game where, Flag goes down with that scary injury. Then all of a sudden, Con Knippel kind of becomes Flag. Like, he starts playing his position. They slide him down to the 4, and he's running the offense. I think that was the moment when NBA execs are like, okay, this guy is not even showing us the full arsenal of what he can do. He is kind of just happy to be the Robin right now because he knows he's got a Batman. And I feel like that was also what was so enticing. And the funniest thing to me about Summer League is that if you watch the Hornets, who I'm a Hornets fan, so I'm, going through that sick process of watching them in Summer League, it was a nice, surprising, Summer League run. But at the start, you watch Liam McNeely and Con Knippel, and you say to yourself, which one's a number 4 pick, right? I mean, McNeely was incredible. I mean, he was the top 3 performer at Summer League because he has the physical tools that sort of fit what you're talking about. But the mentality that Con Knippel has is really hard to find. And again, one of my favorite things B.J. Armstrong said to me back in the day was, you can't measure a man's mind or a man's heart, right? I mean, Con Knippel, you can't measure how smart he is as a player. You can't really measure the heart he has and the impact that he has. He even said when he won MVP, like, KJ should have won it, KJ Simpson from Colorado, who was in his second year. So, like, the humility that he has, the fact that people like playing with him, the fact that he will wear a headband because he has to and is pissed off about it because he looks stupid, like, these are all things that we that are good for the locker room. So Knippel, he's just a winner, and I have to give kudos to the NBA because, like, they're willing to find the nuance of those guys. And it felt like for a time, Cody Williams of the world were going to be guaranteed to go top 10, right? And obviously he just did last year, so it's not like we've gone too far away from that. But Con Knippel going number 4 was pretty shocking.
There was definitely an era, and it's not that far gone, and I think you still see some of it in current drafts among some of the more questionable front offices, possibly the Chicago Bulls, where it's just
anything
like,
is
are
possible.
You an athletic guy? Are you kind of an athletic wing? And we're not really sure what else but you're really athletic, and maybe you played a couple years in the French Pro League. Okay, cool.
You quit on your team in the middle of the playoffs and you want to come to the draft? Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, come on down. Is there a chance we won't have to give you a max contract at any point in time because you'll just fall off the roster eventually, and then we won't have to spend any money? Yeah, but I think that era has passed, and like I said, I think we're in an era now where it's increasingly difficult to sort of scream from the rooftops like, this guy's going to be a good pro. Same sort of deal as Walter Clayton, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like, undersized, old, college guard, short. The NBA used to ignore those guys, and I don't think it's just the Steph Curry effect here. I think there's just a better recognition of, look, man, you just got to watch the guy play basketball. Like, he is really, really good. And I'm going to be fascinated to see how he does in the pros, because I think in terms of production and quality, and obviously he led a team to the national title and an absolutely stacked Final Four full of incredibly good teams. It's going to be really interesting to see how he fares in the pros, but it's encouraging to see a guy like him get drafted almost in the lottery, pretty high in the first round, usually like 17th, 18th, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an interesting pick if you're at that stage of the draft, because super skilled guy, you see all the flaws kind of in the profile or whatever, but as a college winner and the kind of guy that myself as a college fan, you could have seen him going like late second round, and all of a sudden the fans on that team during summer league are like, oh my god, Walter Clayton is so good, like, why did no one pick this team? And I can literally hear like your boss Bill Simmons on his podcast being like, he won the national title, like, how did he not, well, why is he in late second round? But like, NBA teams are taking these guys earlier now, which is, I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. He already got a great nickname, Walt Lake City. He looked the part. He looked like the point guard. Also, you got Isaiah Collier, who they got last year from USC. That was kind of one of those number one guys in his class that falls, and then they get him and Filipowski, who looked great. Filipowski arguably was the MVP of Summer League. You know, I think he actually did win, like, for the entire time. He won whatever award they give out, but he was incredible too. So, like, for Utah fans who, you know, as a Hornets fan, I know how they feel. I mean, there's some, you know, some times where it's really desolate, but they got some good players. Walter Clayton Jr. and Ace Bailey is a fascinating relationship. It's like an older guy who's gone through the gauntlet, who's gone through like the shitty things that happen in college sports and has gotten to the mountaintop. And then a guy that really, you know, has kind of just been, you know, just the best, you know, as far as his group of people, and now gets to be in a lottery position. I think that Walter is going to help him mature. I think they're going to be a fun group. And I do think that, like, we're going to have some Ace Bailey moments where we're like, holy shit, maybe he should have gone number 2, or you know, God forbid number 1. I mean, we'll see.
All right, so I'm gonna out myself. I didn't write about this at the time, but I feel the need to come clean. Colin Murray Boyle snuck up on me that he was drafted that high. Had very little inkling going in the draft that would be the case. And I'll be honest, of any of maybe the guys drafted in the first round, other than the international guys, he's probably the player I watched the least last year, just because, you know, there are only so many hours in the day and there are only so many hours in the night or early morning or whatever time it is when you finish writing or watching basketball. South Carolina was just kind of okay, you know, pretty good, but among the SEC was not, you know, anywhere close to the top of that league. And so I probably saw him a couple of times and thought, yeah, it's pretty good, you know. He's clearly their best player. He's a solid player, but never really was like, oh my God, this guy's definitely a pro. And all of a sudden he's picked 9th overall. What were your thoughts there? What do you kind of make of Colin Murray Boyles as kind of an enigma, at least to me? And that might just, again, I might be outing myself as a casual here. And I know for a fact there will be people in the Discord, for, you know, Trilly Donovan's Discord, who will be like, I watched the tape on every minute of him. He's fantastic, or he's not that good, or whatever. They'll have a very detailed, nuanced take. What's your take?
My take is that Colin Murray Boyles, he got on KOC's board 2 years ago, and Kevin's like, this guy is a lottery-type talent, and that was when I got, like, I mean, I knew he was on the team. I knew that he was a good player. He kind of reminded me of a Trevor Booker that played at Clemson. You know, I'm sure South Carolina fans don't want to hear, you know, a Clemson comp, but that was kind of, you know, the guy that he reminded me of. And then slowly, it goes back to what you're saying about being smarter. It just feels like he fits this defensive weapon that they all want. That's kind of the ability to slide 3, 4, 5, strong enough to, you know, kind of bounce around and take some punishment physically. I think that's what he fits into. So if anything, just the mold of Colin Murray Boyles makes sense. You know, the way that he is built, he's so perfectly built for like an NBA flexible 3, 4, 5 switch defender. But like you said, if you're just like, I watch college basketball for results and I watch the game based on results, like, he was not someone that was going to be, you know, smacking you in the face with all the shocking stuff. Yes, South Carolina was better last year, but this past season, the SEC was the storyline and he was not really a part of the story, which is fascinating because, you know, draftniks, like the guys who are locked into the draft mode, they are watching it, you know what I mean? But they watch college basketball totally differently than you and I are, who are covering the sport for the sport. They're covering the sport for the other sport. And that's right. When things get lost in translation, when those two things are happening. But top 10, I thought was a little bit shocking, but I do see the understanding because defensively he is incredible.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that's tough when if you're not a South Carolina fan, or you're not like a locked-in SEC fan who at least sees these guys a couple times a year, right? Maybe you see them in person. For me, it's like I might throw on whatever bubble team is playing South Carolina late at night and watch for 10, 15 minutes and then flip to the other game. And you're not seeing the defensive nuance, especially. You'll notice, oh yeah, nice finish or whatever. But maybe I'm not, I'm not seeing the strong closeouts with no blow-bys and
yeah, you're not saying to yourself, great block on Blue Cane right there as you watch Georgia play South Carolina late into the night. I know how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, so another thing that I thought was really interesting about the draft, and this even dials into college basketball a little bit more, and I'll be interested to see how this goes in the future, but it was a big theme, particularly on the second night, of even ESPN's coverage talking about NIL's impact on the draft and how it was kind of the consensus among NBA front offices, draftniks, that the second round was more watered down than it has been, for the obvious reason that once upon a time, if someone told you, hey man, you might be a second round pick, it made sense to go and just try because you couldn't get paid, at least not legally, playing college basketball. And now that's obviously not the case. And so you've got guys who are extremely good college basketball players, probably don't rate out as NBA first round picks and may never, right? And so it behooves you if you're, Darian Williams, let's say, although, I could see him being a potential mid-late first round pick at some point, particularly if he really blows up this year. But a guy like that is like, I'm going to get like $4 million to play one season of basketball in college. Like, why would I risk a two-way contract, in the NBA, and then maybe I stall out in the G League? The financial incentives are just totally different now. And so I thought it was interesting that you get guys like Niederhauser got picked with the last pick of the first round, right? Brooks Barnhizer, who, I'll be honest, I never watched him play and thought this guy's a pro. Of course, he got drafted by the Thunder, which means he'll be...
he looked like a pro in Summer League, that's for sure.
I know, he looked great in Summer League. And it's just like, okay, of course, the Thunder drafted him. It's impossible for them to draft someone who's not going to be a legitimate asset in the NBA, if not like a rotation piece on a next year's title team or whatever.
Right.
But you start seeing names like that, you're just kind of like, I don't know. I honestly, I went into the draft a little bit being like, I think this is a little overblown. Like, I think the guys who are there, but you go down the second round of the draft and you're sort of like, I think this is a real deal type of thing. I do understand why NBA people are like, the second round, we're throwing darts at a board here because it's just not, even in the second round, where it's not what it was 5-6 years ago.
And it is fascinating, like just the two names to me, Alabama and Auburn. Like Philon was getting first-round grades, LeBaron Philon, and then he decides to go back because he's like, I'm a late first-round grade. I think I should be a lottery grade, right? And then you have guys like Tahad Pettiford, who's sort of in the same boat where he's like, I'm getting late first round, early second round. I think I should be up in that 15 range. Also, like you're saying, I can go get paid millions of dollars, be the star of this team, almost bet on myself to become... Before it was like you can't really go bet on yourself because you're not getting paid while you're betting on yourself. Now it's like I'm getting paid, handled financially, maybe better than I would be if I was fighting for a two-way or playing in the G League or going overseas or whatever it may be. And I'm in a high-profile position where I'm getting the exposure as well, right? So it's like I'm getting paid well, I'm getting exposed well. It's a win-win. Used to be like you got to almost take a risk. Now it's not really a risk to take because Bruce Pearl's looking at you dead in your eyes and saying, Tahad, I'm going to give you 15 shots. You know what I mean? Right. Think about what you're going to do with 15 shots, right? Same with Philon. I'm going to give you the ball and let you run this offense. So I just think that like the sell is a lot easier for the coaches when you have money behind you. And until this thing gets capped out and we have an idea of what it actually looks like, there's an argument to be made that going to college is actually better financially than going and throwing yourself into this pool. And that's why the NBA is concerned right now because they're like, wait a second, we don't want college to be a competitor, right? We want college to be our basically minor league that we don't have to deal with. And that to me is the fascinating future between the two leagues, two sports.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key example to me is Armando Bacot of like the NIL era in general, because how many times throughout our lives did we see a guy like Armando Bacot play like he did in the title run, and the NBA is telling him, we don't really have a place for you here. You know what I mean? Like your skill set's great for the college game. You're obviously a monster rebounder, but the NBA game works a little differently. We need you to be able to jump higher and run faster and guard closeouts and shoot threes or shoot jumpers, whatever. And time was, and it wasn't that long ago, Armando Bacot would have said, cool, I hear you. I'm still going into the draft because I want to make money playing basketball. And if I don't do it, then I'll go play for 300, 500K overseas and try to do it for 10, 15 years if I can, and then figure out what's next, right? Still a good life. You know, it was never I remember when Kyle Singler went to play in Spain or whatever, and I looked up where he was actually playing. He was like in San Sebastian, Spain, getting paid like a little under $1 million a year. And, you know, people gave him a hard time before he made his way back to the NBA. And it's like, Kyle Singler still has a pretty good life. Like, yeah, right. This is not a bad way to make a living when you're in your early and mid 20s. But, you know, obviously the way it played out with Bacot is North Carolina kept him and he stayed in college because he could make money from that. And he didn't have to just say, screw it, I'm going in the draft. It's probably not going to work out, but I'll give it my best shot. Maybe I'll impress some scouts along the way. So, yeah, the calculus has obviously changed. And that actually brings us to our next topic, which you alluded to, which is revenue sharing. and particularly the way revenue sharing is going to apparently work with sort of the current NIL collective system that we have. And I would encourage folks to hang tight with us here, because that sounds boring, right? That's a boring sell. But it is interesting because, just to lay this out, and I wrote about this last week. On July 10th, pardon me, the College Sports Collective, which is the new organization that's overseeing how athletes are compensated through NIL deals, and all the NIL deals over $600 have to go to them through their clearinghouse. Deloitte rates them, says yes, this is fine, or no, this is sketchy. They
based
put out
on
guidance,
based on Deloitte's valuation, by the way,
valuation, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like what your market value is according to Deloitte, which is why this whole thing is going to be very
dicey
interesting
to begin with as a premise. The whole
premise,
concept is a little questionable, considering, as far as I understand, and I'm not an economist, the market tells you what your value is by how much people are willing to give you.
100%.
But setting that to one side, this is what the system's going to be, because people outside of college sports in various courtrooms around the country have decided as much. The CSC put out guidance that said, by the way, collectives are not valid businesses. If you're getting paid by a collective, it's not going to get through the clearinghouse. Mm-hmm. And all of these, that was July 10th. All of these coaches had a complete meltdown. I wrote about, particularly with block quotes and stuff from Matt Norlander's piece, as we talked about earlier. He was at Peach Jam talking to coaches anonymously who were all like, is this legit? Like, if we can't pay guys through the collectives anymore, but, I'm Alabama and 2/3 of my revenue sharing money is going to the football team, I'm at a disadvantage to a team like Marquette, which has way bigger slice of that, $20.5 million to give to basketball players. How many other coaches are going to try to get around the system? And it's large sums of money, and it just sounded like a huge mess. 2 days, a day or so after I wrote that piece, or maybe before, maybe it was the same day, the news came out that actually that's not how it's going to work. The CSC is going to accept collectives, which I think is probably the best outcome. But this entire conversation, to me, is indicative of, and we've talked about this on your show a lot, like college basketball being in a really good place. And in my view, despite the sort of wonkiness of it, NIL has been a big part of that. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason why the second round of the NBA draft isn't as good, and all those guys are staying in college now. It's because they can get paid. And the NIL collective thing is sort of, you'd like it to be a little bit more straightforward. It has fueled a lot of that. And so you bring in this revenue sharing thing, great, there's more money for players as long as the collective stuff still works. If it doesn't work, or Deloitte is going to be particularly harsh about how some of these deals are set up or what players' market value is, you're just in a limbo period. And I think for me, you can understand why coaches, even if, post this collective decision getting sort of revised, are looking at it being like, I have no idea how to plan my roster for the next 2 years. I have no idea how this is going to look. I don't know what I'm going to be able to pay, what the collective situation is going to be, and how I'm going to go into next spring having really no clue how to manage my budget. And that's a big part of what college coaching is, and what college staffs do now is budgetary management for how to build your roster.
It's a disaster in that sense, right? I mean, if you really are trying to look 12 months, 18 months, 24 months out into the future, nobody knows and everybody has a different answer. And I think you're correct. The collectives and the rev share have to exist, but we also have so much more litigation that's still outstanding, that's out there. Not that it's outstanding in a good way, that it's just still, has to be solved as far as the NCAA being sued into oblivion, because that's also what's happening in real time, and they have no. Look at the ACC thing is kind of an example of this. It's like once they go to court, they decide that the grant of rights is unconstitutional. Now these teams don't have to pay an exit fee, and Florida State, Clemson, Carolina, NC State, everybody that wants to leave can leave, right? And that's basically, they announced it as like, we have made some beautiful compromise. This was not a compromise, you know what I mean? But like, that's the way that it's framed, and I think that's sort of what has kind of happened with this NIL stuff. It's like, we're trying to frame this in the best way possible to make it sound like it's palatable. Like, now it'll all be good. We got the $20 million and we'll ref share it, and the football will get, they're 55% and basketball will get 45, and we'll figure out the other, the rest of it, and yada, yada, yada. But it is not as clean and easy as it obviously should be, or we hoped it would be. And I just feel like when Deloitte is involved, are they really going to be day-to-day looking at every deal from Texas Tech all the way down to, Cal State Fullerton? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, the whole thing to me sounds like a lot of red tape, and it sounds like a lot of skirting the rules. And it's also like, who's going to enforce this? Again, the enterprise that is basically defunct and getting sued into oblivion, they're going to do it? I don't know. So I just, from a big picture standpoint with all of it, it just feels like I feel for the administrators. I feel for the coaches. I feel for the players, even though at least they're getting paid now, but it's still very convoluted and confusing. So we're just kind of in this limbo until more litigation comes through. And, like you said, for the common fan, they're just like, tell me when it's all said and done. You know what I mean?
Seriously.
Tell me what the rules are and we'll play them. And that's what's frustrating.
Yeah, and it's like, you go through, what has it been now, 5 years essentially of NIL, a little bit longer than that. And yeah, it started as like, do a, deal with the local, pizza place, put it on your Instagram, get 10K. Isn't this nice? Players can get some sponsorship deals, and they can put their, names on the back of jerseys now and get a little bit of revenue off of that. It's obviously morphed into something different, but I do feel like everybody kind of got their arms around it. The money keeps getting bigger, but the essential concept is the same. And everybody understands what the situation is. And now the situation is completely different. Right as everyone in college sports kind of got used to this new paradigm, started building around it and structuring their off seasons around it. If you're a coach now, you're going into yet another completely new world. And look, college basketball coaches make a lot of money. They are paid very well to be able to figure this stuff out. But you do feel for them a little bit when they're trying to understand just like, what are the rules I'm operating under? Because they, as we just sort of laid out at the top of this section, they change weekly, it feels like,
Also,
monthly.
the people making the rules, changing the rules, have never been in the sport for the most part, right? I mean, that to me, I feel like is the real, and I joked on my show that Coach K should be in the room, but I mean, somebody of some sort of ilk that has been in the sport, like as some sort of consultant, Deloitte, they obviously are consulting everywhere. Why can't Coach K or Jim Boeheim, or, you know what I mean? Can we have some sort of coaching consultant in the room that's just like, no, that would actually be a disaster if that's what we tried to do. You know what I mean? And I'm sure, coaches are curmudgeons in their own way, and that would be hard to do. But somebody that gets it should be in there, because a lot of times it feels like it's made in a vacuum.
I would love to see the methodology that Deloitte is going to use to calculate market value for deals. Like,
Me too.
What spreadsheet model has someone cooked up at Deloitte to analyze, if it is even a spreadsheet, whether or not a player is getting fair market value on whatever NIL deal gets.
And on the scale, like, give me, like, is it Sam Gilbert scales or is it like Holden Thorpe scales? You know what I mean? Like, give me the range where it's like, are we super academic when it comes to the scaling of the market value, and we're going to go to economists and we're going to like really analyze it and do that? Or are we just going to be like, hey, this car dealership says they want to pay him $250,000. The market's the market. Sign off, it's done. You know what I mean? That's what I think we all want to figure out too.
Yeah, it's a weird deal, and I think NIL was the first step toward, now we have revenue sharing, which is, hey, these guys still aren't employees, but we do have to pay them some money, and it's a set amount, and that set amount's divided, and schools can figure out how they want to divide it based on, their football team or their basketball team or women's basketball, anything under the revenue sports category. But it is still, you just come back to it and you think, NIL, I felt like was and I know there are going to be fans and listeners hearing this thinking, I hate NIL and I can't stand it, and I want to go back to the days of just pure amateurism, or what we understood as pure amateurism, where I think Tom Izzo told Matt that he estimated there were 10 to 15% of coaches were cheating back under the old system. I might go a little higher than that. A little higher than that.
I would say 10 to 15% were not cheating. I would actually, I would flip that around the other way.
However you want to define it, whether it's large bags of cash, or
I mean, it also depends on, again, it goes back to the sliding scales. Are we doing Sam Gilbert cheating, or are we doing Holden Thorpe cheating? You know what I mean?
or are we doing Kelvin Sampson cheating, where you're just sending too many text messages,
Right.
Because you're panicked and you want to get players, and then they change the rule 2 years later, and no one cares about text messages anymore.
I mean, seriously.
You just come back to this, and like, it does feel like, hey, we had a good thing going here for a minute. And if you're not going to do full employment, kind of letting this sort of weird quasi, not exactly black market, but kind of gray market NIL thing take shape, felt like a decent compromise of like, hey, we're not going to make these guys amateurs, but whatever amount of money they can get from the quote unquote free market is fine. And yes, we're going to run that through a collective that I have a lot of, oversight over as a coach. Messy, but has been working okay for the last few seasons, as we've seen from the product on the court. It's at an all-time high. The teams are older, they're more veteran, they've got way more international talent coming to the game. Guys are staying longer to make money. It's been good for college basketball, despite some fans and certainly coaches' annoyances that guys leave after a year and go get paid, whereas they might have been more inclined to not transfer in the past. Now that we're doing this, it's like, all right, just make them all employees. Make them all employees, make a salary cap, and if you're a college basketball player, you get into the union, and the union will collectively bargain. There's plenty of unions in the country with way more way more members than college basketball players are, in terms of sheer numbers. Just go to that, because now we're in if we were halfway there with NIL, now we're like 75% of the way there, and yet it's somehow even muddier and weirder and makes less sense to everybody involved, including the people who are actually supposed to know what's happening.
And I also feel like it can, because it's so gray area, right, that it can almost be, if someone did have, an agenda, like I feel like you could manipulate this to match an agenda also, you know what I mean? So like, I just, like you said, I mean, we're almost there. If we can just get to the final act, which I know a lot of people turn their nose up, and then they say, well, this isn't college sports anymore. Well, maybe it isn't. You know what I mean? And guess what? Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Michigan, Carolina, Indiana, California, like these are all major brands and they're major businesses. And like, if there's a world in which this turns into pro basketball, I mean, it's the ABA. You know what I mean? They might be competing with the NBA. I don't know, but like at the end of the day, people are going to pull for these schools and these teams because they're attached to them. And I do think some of the I won't watch anymore is a little bit of it's a veiled threat, is what I would say.
Look, people have their own proclivities, and certainly, I mean, not to be ageist about it, but I think if you watched amateur college basketball for your entire life, and in the last 5 years, all of a sudden the guys are getting paid and they're leaving schools, much more frequently than they used to. I think of like Virginia fans who, for the first however many years of Tony Bennett's tenure, the first decade really, got to revel in this like old school program building, stylistic, kind of traditional basketball program, and then that they win a national title and the rug gets pulled out from under you, and all of a sudden you've got to adapt to this different world, and it's not really a world that Tony Bennett wants to participate in. And you can understand why. That's not how he wanted to build a program. It's why he wanted to go to Virginia in the first place, because he felt like he could kind of, and he said it many times, he could kind of do things the way he wanted to do it. There wouldn't be a huge amount of pressure to win right away, and he was correct, and he sort of remade that entire basketball program in his image. I understand the frustration with it, but I don't have a lot of time for the idea that this same sport where coaches are getting paid $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million a year, and all of this money went to buildings on campus,
right?
Athletics facilities, new gyms, new arenas.
Right.
Like, just the money was always there. It just the players weren't getting any of it, and now they're getting it. The same boosters who would make Oklahoma State's locker room have a PlayStation and an Xbox at every locker with its own TV. That money's going to the talent now, and that's good. Baubles are great, but making $2 million a year and putting money in sort of your family, for a generation or two is much more important. And that's the market telling these players that that's what they're worth, right? So I don't have a ton of time for people who complain about the players getting paid if they don't have the same energy for coaches. Now, if you want to say that every coach should be a gym teacher and should make a gym teacher salary or a professor's salary, we can have that conversation. But that's not where we've been in college sports pretty much from the beginning. And so
it's always been big business. You know what I mean? It just got bigger 100%. And bigger. Yeah.
It's gotten bigger and bigger. And you look at like you mentioned, you rattled off a list of schools whose athletics budgets are massive.
And again, I didn't even get to have. I mean, you know what I mean? I was just thinking. I mean, Ohio State, don't get mad at me. You know, you go down the list. There's so many more. It's insane. And like I said, they all have brand and they have the loyalty built in. Like, no offense, if it's the Charlotte Hornets or the North Carolina Tar Heels, the people in the state of North Carolina are going to choose the North Carolina Tar Heels. You know what I mean? Like, that's right. If they get in that pool. You know, and that's what we're trying to protect it from too. You know, you want it to stay the same in some sort of fashion, and I think the answer's right there. Everyone's just afraid to say it. I mean, I feel like Jay Billis will eventually say it one time after he said it 100 times, and then people will be like, you know what, great point, Jay, and then it will move on. And
I can't believe
we'll
no
see
one
when
said
that day
this
happens. Yeah, right. First time I heard that. Right.
Yeah,
it'd be great.
Anyway, I also, even as a college sports fan, as I mentioned sort of at the beginning of the section, I appreciate if you have gone through this entire section with us, because even I, as a college basketball writer and someone who's covered this sport professionally for over 15 years at this point, my eyes glaze over with some of this stuff too.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, I just
the
want
biggest eye roll around. Yeah.
Tell me who's on the teams. Tell me who's good at what. Analyze the game. Watch the games. Enjoy, and not have to think about Econ 101. But this is kind of where we are. It's also the dead of the offseason, and this is what people are talking about right now. So, but I do want to transition, because I feel like pretty often when I come on One Shining Pod, we're talking storylines. We got. I feel like you're a big fan of a storyline. So give me as we all are, to be honest. But I wanted to take your temperature on some of the storylines coming into this season, and I've got one for you that probably hits close to home. But I want to hear what you're thinking about coming in as we sort of kind of creep our way toward. I think there's 100 days, 101 days, something like that till college basketball starts. What do you think the big sort of sweeping themes are this year?
Yeah, I said the talent that was coming back to college basketball. We hit on that. We mentioned some of the guys that, decided to drop out of the draft. I mean, Thomas Houck is another guy that, comes back with the champions. I feel like is going to have a huge year. I know we're talking about Xavier Lee, Boogie Flam, but like Thomas Houck was incredible during that run, and I think he's going to have a big run. I think some people don't remember that guys like Alex Caravan are coming up and coming back to college basketball. Former 5-stars like Mackenzie Mbako going to a school like Texas A&M, right? There's a lot of talent that's in college basketball. So that's one that I wanted to point out. But I do want to start in Raleigh, because I think Will Wade and the NC State propaganda, I did not know if NC State could propagate in the year 2025. I've seen them propagate in the past. I've seen them use the past to propagate in the present, but I've never seen them be able to use the present as propaganda. And here we are. And I do feel like Will Wade is obviously a big driver of that. I'm a big fan of Will Wade. I think that they have obviously some talented players coming in. They did the great shiesty move of getting Vin Allen Lubin from Carolina to NC State just for the storyline. They play Carolina once, which I think is great for Will Wade. It's one game to throw everything at Carolina and get that win, which is all he wants to kind of set the tone for that program. He'll probably wear a red suit when he coaches that game. So I just feel like NC State, like as much as Duke is probably upset that NC State is stealing a little bit of their thunder as far as the media coverage, I do think NC State is a story. And again, I didn't know if they could do it. I didn't know if Will Wade could do it. I thought the Aura Khan was going to be annoying. I think it kind of is, but he's almost past it. You know what I mean? Like, he's past it. He's like got his new thing. He's got these guys on his little show where he like stares at the camera and is like, look at this guy. Can you believe I got Darian Williams to come to NC State? So I just wanted to shout out Will Wade. I feel like that's a big storyline. He's a big character. Rick Pitino's right there as well. I think he'd be my second coach that I would go into as far as my fascination. And then Ryan Odom would be my third, because I think Virginia is going to be a nice, pleasant surprise for everybody in the basketball world. So that would be my rundown of my big three things. It's, what Will Wade is going to do at NC State, trying to tap back into who they are as a Tobacco Road powerhouse. Rick Pitino, Ian Jackson, what the Red Storm is up to, and then Ryan Odom resetting the program there at Virginia. So those would be my big three for you.
Virginia's a good one. It's one I keep wanting to write, because talk about a transition.
They're going to be good, by the way.
They are going to be good,
yeah.
And they're going to be good in the way that most good college basketball teams these days are good, which is get a bunch of guys to come in, pay them well. I mean, reportedly, Virginia's up in the $10 million NIL range, which is kind of unthinkable considering that just wasn't a playground that Tony Bennett wanted to play in at that level.
Also in the SEC range, by the way, like
Yes.
fully in cahoots with Carolina talking about the SEC. So, I mean, there's a lot happening at Virginia right now.
It's a little sad to hear because we talked about them as potential Big Ten additions on a pod once upon a time. I feel like both those schools would fit culturally, but the SEC works too. Not that I want any more schools to go to other conferences.
We wanted to
frankly
stop,
done with conference
I'm done
realignment. I'm not rooting for that to happen. I just want to make that perfectly clear. But no, Virginia is not just going to be an interesting team, but an interesting story in the way that this is now a total transition, right? You had Tony stepping down before, last season, maybe right around this time. It was a little bit later than this, I guess it would have been.
Yeah, about a couple months, yeah.
Yeah, last summer. And then, you install his chosen successor, doesn't go well. And now you have the license as an athletics program and Carla Williams, the athletics director, to go in a totally different direction. And not totally different, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like they didn't hire Will Wade,
Yeah, right.
But they are hiring a coach who's just going to be like, yeah, we're going to get, we're not trying to swerve against the tide here. We're going to do things the way that most competent college basketball programs do them. And I will be interested to see how Virginia fans feel about that, because I think if the team is good, everyone will be happy. But I do think there's something about Virginia fans that are going to be a little bit sort of bittersweet that this is, they are doing it like everybody else now, when the Tony Bennett way sort of was such a point of pride, I think, for so many fans there. So it's going to be interesting to see not just how the team performs on the floor, which I agree with you. I think they're going to be good, but just sort of how Virginia
Ryan Odom
kind of process it.
Yeah, he might feel like Will Wade to Virginia fans, getting used to the change. You know what I mean? Like, that's how much of a sharp. It's not like going to be crazy contrast, but I do think there is going to be a level of like recalibrating as what it is to be a part of Virginia basketball. I mean, one perfect example of that is Kyle Guy, right? I mean, Kyle Guy on staff with Tony Bennett. A lot of people wanted him to stay on staff. Ryan Odom gets the job. Says thanks, but no thanks. You know what I mean? And that is not a very, you know what I mean? Like, that's a perfect example, a little thing where it's like Tony Bennett would definitely make sure his guy's taken care of forever. But Ryan Odom's like, look, congratulations, you won the 2019 National Championship. We're moving on to a new, different era. And I think that kind of spoke volumes. And by the way, shout out to Kyle Guy. Gets a job with Steve Alford at Nevada. Nevada's going to have a good team this year. And they got a fun staff out there. They're kind of Indiana out west. So I know that speaks to your heart a little bit, too. They got a lot of guys on that staff from Indiana. So, I just think Virginia's going to be fun. And I'm excited to see what Ryan Odom can do. And obviously, Dave Odom was there back when they had Ralph Sampson. So you got the connective tissue to the past, too.
For sure. It's not a total break from, everything. But it is an interesting change and an interesting transition. And, one I think was bound to happen eventually, given the way the last few years with Tony went. Okay, the one I wanted to bring to you.
Please.
And for folks who listened to the second episode of this podcast last week with Will Warren, we talked about at some length, and I'm fascinated by it, is Hubert, but not just Hubert, the Carolina roster and the money that was spent on the roster, and the new GM, who apparently has a bunch of bonuses in his contract. If they win a tournament game, he gets another $8 million or something crazy. It's not really that. That's fake news. It's like he's making a little under $1 million, I think, is the reporting. But as a Carolina guy, where are you on this roster? Where are you on Hubert these days? Kind of what is the vibe with Carolina going into this season?
I think promise is the word, right? And this is sort of the idea of Hubert Davis. Like, the promise of Hubert Davis is the perfect candidate for North Carolina. Walter Davis, he is a Roy guy. He is a Dean guy, right? And this is sort of the prince that was promised. And everybody is still waiting for the promises to sort of come to fruition. And again, it was a great hot start. Obviously, the 2022 run, if you talk to Carolina fans, some of them are still almost resting on their laurels a little bit about how that went down. And they're like, I'm okay until, we need to be really ramping things back up. But I think the button is about to be pushed after this season. I think that the sense of urgency is there, because if you're the Carolina apparatus, the powers that be there, you have given them the money that they said they needed to get the roster to win. If they do not win, then we revisit the issue. And I think one of the funniest things to me with Hubert Davis is that, a lot of people talk about his contract, how little he gets paid and all this sort of stuff. Well, I mean, that's sort of what's saving him from more scrutiny, right? I mean, there's not a financial investment that's at a high level that, we really have to go address this problem. Also, in reality, you're saving money to go get maybe a bigger fish on the back end. After Belichick, the athletic department, they're obviously doing a sea change right now. Bubba Cunningham is kind of getting phased out as they bring in the new athletic department. If you and I know anything covering college sports, what does a new athletic director like to do more than anything? Hire his guy. I think that is something, if I was, in that camp, I would be concerned about. But again, you look at the staff, these are all guys that have won, that know how to win, that know the Carolina way. So there is the hope, there is the promise. And as far as the roster itself, I do like, if Luka can get in to the school and Luka plays, then I think, and not Luka Doncic, Luka Bogovac, I believe is how you pronounce his name, and I probably got it wrong, but I'll learn it when he plays at Carolina if he does get in. But he's really the one that they're waiting on. I like Jaren Stevenson. He's a guy from Pittsburgh that they wanted to go there in the first place, so I think that's a nice addition at the 3 spot. Caleb Wilson, obviously saw him in the McDonald's All-American game. He looks exactly like Marvin Williams, the same rebounding butt. You know what I mean? Like just built exactly the same way. So he'll be a nice piece for them. Elliot Cadeau on this roster with Visar would have been incredible. It would have been exactly what Elliot Cadeau needed last year to be the best version of himself. I think it's sort of, two ships in the night passing each other, the fact that they're not going to be playing at Carolina together. I think the way that Ian Jackson and Elliot Cadeau were kind of handled on the way out, that was not very good from a PR standpoint. You know what I mean? And what little I know, how it was handled was not great. So, I mean, there's a lot of... Yeah.
Real quick, was it, okay, peace out, see you later? Or was it sort of a half-hearted attempt to keep him around? Like, how did it go?
I think that Ian Jackson was, I think he was recruitable back, but I think he just got out-recruited to St. John. So I don't really take that one as too much of a slap in the face. It was just like, hey, he's from New York. He likes being in New York. They're telling him he's going to be the point guard of St. John's and he's going to play in the Garden. You kind of get the draw. I think with Cadeau, he felt like they didn't want him back, which, I mean, by all accounts from the Carolina side, that's not true. But, from his side, that seems to be the case, how he felt. And, you feel like somebody doesn't want you back and then someone gives you a $2 million offer. I think you're going to feel like you want to go where you're wanted. So Dusty May made that move quickly. And that happened. The crazy part about the world we live in now, like the tampering that we used to see at the NBA now is at college because of the agents, obviously. But, like, Elliot Cadeau was at Tahad Pettiford's game because they're good friends. And, there's reports that, like, Pettiford was, like, the top guy that Carolina's going after. So and I don't think that's true, but it's just, like, if that's the case, like, common sense, even if someone's recruiting you or someone's doing something shady to you, I'll text you and let you know. You know what I mean? That's
right.
If you know somebody, that's usually what's going to happen. So some of that stuff feels like it can't be true, but at the same time, I don't have the sources to say whether it was or wasn't. But those are sort of the rumblings that are going around. I think Cadeau was a big loss, and I will be interested to see if they can replace him because they really needed him. If they had Cadeau, this would be a really good team.
Yeah, and I mean, it may be as simple as I don't feel like I'm wanted because the offer wasn't big enough. And,
right.
With
Maybe
all the
so.
reporting about what North Carolina spent on this roster this year, I think Inside Carolina reported it was upwards of $14 million, which would put it pretty high. I mean, if not number one, I think, among college basketball teams, which is not an inherently surprising thing for North Carolina to do. It's just surprising given the recent history, right? Because they haven't taken NIL seriously. And Hubert made a big, point of it during the season of just like, we got to get better at this. We're hiring a GM. I need to take some of this stuff off of my plate and focus more on the coaching side and recruiting, but not the deals and what, raising money and all that a GM and the, working with the collectives and all that stuff has to do. Like, if that's how much Carolina was spending on this roster and Cadeau saying, hey man, they're offering me $2 million if I'll stay here for 2 or a little bit less or whatever it was, I'm just throwing numbers out there. Nobody take this as reporting, obviously. And Carolina's like, no. I don't know, man. You didn't really have a good year, You kind of had a bad sophomore year. You can understand if it was just kind of like time for everyone to move on.
And you got this is parents. I mean, this is like online, like the world that we live in now. Like Twitter, unfortunately, is a part of these things. I mean, there was a lot that was happening with the Cadeau situation in general. I just wanted to give you the projected starting five, and then you tell me what it sounds like. If it's a second round exit, if it's a tournament, you know what I mean? You just tell me what it sounds like. So Kion Evans starting at point guard, right? Seth Trimble is kind of like the 2 guard, but going to be the backup point guard, I would assume, like in that spot guard spot. So they're both starting in the backcourt. We got Luka Bogovac, who's going to be the guard wing there at the 3 for them. Going to be taking, I believe, the most shots, him or Trimble, we'll see. You got freshman Caleb Wilson or Jaren Stevenson as that 4 kind of hybrid guy. And then at, forward center, basically 5-man, Henry Visar. So, and Visar came to Carolina because he just wanted to come to Carolina by all accounts. So, I mean, that wasn't even much of a recruitment as much as he wanted to be there. So that's your starting 5, and I present that to you. I serve it up. If you're just objectively looking at that, you're saying to yourself, that's a team that could win a title, because I do think that Hubert needs at least a second weekend. Can he get to a second weekend with that team is the question.
Yeah, I mean, sure. It's all whatever matchups in the tournament and
yeah, of course. Yeah, this is all. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, sure. Like the thing to me, and again, apologies.
It just isn't $14 million like on paper, right? I mean, that's the problem,
thing, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing with that I talked about with Will, and I wrote about it at over this offseason. It's not that it's a bad roster; it's a perfectly fine roster, pretty good, maybe even really good. Like we'll see. It's just like
James Brown surprises, or right. There's some guys that can shock you. Right.
Yeah, it's just like Darian Williams is not on the team. Like JT Toppin's not on the team. You know what I mean? Like it's just, and so
Seth Trimble is your Darian Williams, your guy. You know what I mean? Like he's your main guy on this team, and Seth's a good player, but he's never been that guy before.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that he was like, okay, Seth, we really want you to stay. What's it going to take? And he was like, I need $4 million. That's hard to imagine, right? Like, so it's just an interesting, you got a lot of money. This is what you put together with it. And it dovetails with the thing that I think I found the most fascinating, which maybe is going to go away, maybe kind of not, of just like trying to understand how people are spending their money beyond what the top line number is. Because I think that's most pertinent with Carolina this year, a little bit with Indiana. And it's a topic that I keep returning to this offseason. I just find it interesting. But I did want to get your take on Carolina because you're in the weeds with Carolina in a way that
it does feel like a PR win on both sides, if I will say. You know what I mean? I just think if you put out there that this is the most expensive roster, what does that send a message to the rest of college basketball? Okay, Carolina will spend money, right? They're not afraid to spend money. They're not playing the old game. They're playing the new game. And 2, if it fails, which it could, you basically have already told everyone that they had the most money in college basketball and it didn't work. So it's the guy's fault that spent all the money and didn't win. You know what I mean? Like if you really think about it, it serves 2 purposes and can play both ways. So that to me, if I'm going big picture, what the idea is, I think that's the idea. Hey, insert big time coach. You get $15 million if you come to Carolina. Also, if you don't win with $15 million, you get fired.
Right. I had not thought about it that way at all. That is a fascinating way to look at it. And I think there's probably something there. A little.
I will say it's a communication school. Yeah, this is a journalism communication school. They know sometimes what the messaging is, even though sometimes the messaging is really bad. So we'll see.
And it may be. I mean, you could tell me too, but there maybe it'll be kind of challenging to get rid of Hubert just from an emotional standpoint. Obviously, the guy loves the program,
I'm a big fan of Hubert Davis, no matter what. You know what I mean? That's what I tell people all the time. I'm just like, I don't really care. You can put it in whatever box you want to, but like, I love Hubert Davis. I think he represents what's right with the sport and what's right with people. And we joked about it, Tice and I, all the time. The good guy of the year. I mean, Hubert is a good guy, and unfortunately, sometimes in college basketball, contrary to what Tom Izzo may think, they don't always win, and that's the unfortunate part.
Right. Okay, well that wraps Carolina, and I think that probably wraps our show. We got some storylines in there. We got some draft look back, and it was good to rattle off some random draft thoughts with someone who, as I heard you on multiple podcasts on the Ringer Network, doing yeoman's work. One Shining Pod coming back soon, I assume. Everybody go check that out. We're getting into preview season, as mentioned. And thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it. It was great to talk to you.
Of course. One last thing I had for you I just wanted to throw out quickly. Wooden Award odds are out courtesy of FanDuel. And guess who made the board Bryce James and Kion Anthony. Kion Anthony plus 24,000. Bryce James plus 25,000. I wanted to get your odds that one of those two could win the Wooden Award in their first year in college basketball.
I think they're higher than that. I think those are
I think so
generous
too.
in
I thought the odds would be higher, so I wanted to give them a shout out.
There's
There's some believers, you know what I mean?
I don't do a ton of betting, but I did put down a bet on golf. I think it was like the U.S. Open, which is notoriously difficult or something. And I bet one golfer will not bogey a single hole of the 72 holes or whatever. And I sent it like as a goof to my friends who are diehard golf fans, and they were like, "You just wasted $3. Like this is the dumbest thing anyone's ever done." I was like, well, I don't know. It seemed fun, so go get out there and get your Bryce James futures.
Who knows? They might hit.
Real quick before we go, wanted to say thank you to Home Field for sponsoring the show. I also want to thank our producer, Corey Aldis, who puts it together and cleans up my audio, which he's had to do a couple times now. So thank you, Corey. Hopefully this is a little cleaner and a little tidier. And again, thank you, Tate, for being here. Like I said, it was great to talk some ball with you, and we'll do it again soon.
Anytime, man.